welcome to Vermont Film Essentials. My name is Devon Ewalt.
I'm David Metzger.
And today we're going to be talking about one of the best, not only American films of all time, but films in general, one Taxi Driver from 1976. Beautiful piece of art, if I may say so myself.
From director Martin Scorsese, which we were just saying, this is in the whole Vermont Film Essentials catalog. This is the first Scorsese movie, so I'm happy about that. So coincidentally, last night on TCM, they had a Scorsese night. So they started with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yep.
Then they went to Mean Streets, and then Taxi Driver was on after. And we caught Mean Streets, and watching it, Mean Streets is a great movie in its own right, but you see you see everything that Scorsese will do in later films, all right there, including some shots that are reminiscent of here.
Things just got tighter.
Yes.
Like he was able to kind of get more of a scope of what he wanted to pull off, where like less fat was left on the, he trimmed the fat a little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah.
And with Taxi Driver, so first off,
it's crazy that there's only 3 years separating these films, right?
Yeah, 73, 76.
Like, whoa, it's like light years in
Right.
I mean, unless he just intended Mean Streets to be this raw, gritty, edgy, like Dog Day Afternoon kind of feeling movie. You know what I mean? Which it definitely is.
Right. And there's a little bit of this that feels that way too, but there's Paul Schrader's script is so tightly constructed that Scorsese is able to interpret it so well.
It never feels like French Connection or anything like that. You know what I mean? There's something very artistic going on in how it's conveyed. You know, it's.
You said it before. It's a film that there's no other film like it. It's a one of a kind experience. It's a film that you watch and it could come out today and you'd be like, my God, how could they have said the things that they say in this? How could they have done the things that
it's a true, authentic dissection of the American experience that is often ignored. And he sort of just took the gloves off and said, you know what? I'm just gonna reflect New York City for what it really is right now. All the everything, just let it all hang out. Like, why try to whitewash anything? This is what it is. Like, let's deal with it. And let's deal with what happens to people when they come home from war and feel isolated. And it really plays, we could talk about it on a cinematic level, but the writing and the character development are really one of the things that's on full display, as well as the beautiful filmmaking.
I think it's one of the greatest character studies in film.
Back to back, to go from Popeye Doyle to Travis Bickle, it's really special, man. These are really two of the greats.
When people say, what was New York like in the 70s, you're either going to say one of those two films. And it's actually amazing how many people say, when someone's saying, what was it like in the 70s in New York City, in that particular area of New York City,
the West Side,
have you ever seen Taxi Driver? It's that.
Right.
And how much the feelings, how if someone is honest with themselves, all the feelings in this film, no matter how questionable or psychotic or dark, if you're honest with yourself, you have had feelings close to that. And it is very hard sometimes going through this life and not feeling those feelings and not getting sucked up into those feelings and not losing yourself the way he does.
Thankfully, the Leonard Maltin 2-star rating, in which he said, a gory, cold-blooded story of a sick man's lurid descent into violence, ugly and unredeeming. Thankfully that is in the minority as far as reviews, because I grew up reading that book, and before I saw the film, I knew his review, and it was just amazing to find out that it's like you can't go into a movie like that prepared to just kind of subject your own values and morals onto the the film and say, oh, well, this behavior is ugly, the choice to do this is ugly, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, apparently you don't want to deal with what's going on here. And you can't have every character be likable. And you can't, and actually, this is one of the most multi-dimensional characters ever portrayed on screen. Sybil Shepherd's character talks about the walking contradiction. It's a beautiful encapsulation of his character in a monologue, because he really is one of those people where 1 second you're like, man, it's like Scorsese talks about him being this avenging angel, and then in the next part it's like presidential assassin, but it's like, not presidential assassin, but senatorial assassin.
Right.
And it's like, if you really look at all the different things that are being dissected in this film, political corruption. There's a scene with Albert Brooks's character where she says, you sound like you're selling mouthwash. She goes, we are selling mouthwash. It's like all these little things in the script that are showing you, look at, and there's a point where where Jodie Foster says, what do you want me to do, call the police? He says, no, the police don't do nothing. It's like, man, so police corruption, political corruption. It's like, is there anyone that's uncorrupted? And here's this one person that has just had it with it, and it doesn't justify his actions.
Right.
It just makes it interesting to view.
Well, and because there's moments like the structure of the screen, like the whole first part of the movie, you identify with him on a couple of different levels. Like, he's a guy who feels lost, he's lonely, he's a vet, so obviously he's got that stuff going on. But you kind of you identify with certain moments of him. Like there's the moment where he goes to the movie theater and he's trying to talk to the checkout girl, and it's
at a porn theater though.
Right.
That's the thing. It's that's what makes it so potentially cringeworthy, right?
Yes.
So there's a scene where you are sort of cringing, but not in disgust at him as a person.
Right.
You just feel bad for how naive he is, like socially naive. You're like, damn, dude, don't you realize that she doesn't want to talk to you?
Right.
And it's really sad to watch those scenes,
And it gets to a level. So there's that scene. There's the scene where every time I watched it with a friend back in high school, I want to talk about the first time that we saw this movie, but back in high school when I would show it to friends and everything, there would be this scene that no one would get, and I would just be like, well, don't you see that's the whole movie?
Right.
But it's when he's out with Sybil Shepherd on their date, and he's trying to explain organized.
I know.
And she's like, oh, you mean and it's like, but.
Well,
why? What was that? That was stupid. Why did she not understand what she's saying? It's because he can't communicate to people, and he can't. He just has so much trouble communicating on a basic level.
Right.
That he misses so many.
And even on the flip side, I think it's almost that he's such a direct communicator that sometimes people aren't listening to what he's saying. He says organized correctly. Before a couple lines before it, because I got to get organized. It's like, and then he says it's like one of those, and then he says organized.
Yeah.
So clearly, if she's listening and she's contextually listening, right, she understands that he knows what the word organized sounds like and how to say it, right? So it's just an interesting scene. I love the scene when he asks her out. And it is the complete contrast of the scene in which he is rejected, in which we have to. There's the end of when their date ends badly, and also the phone call where the camera moves off of him so that we're spared his,
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
But when he asks her out, man, it is this scene of redemption, and it's like frozen in time. Even though we sort of know that it's not going to end well, when he goes, you got me to protect you, and she laughs.
Yeah.
He made her laugh.
Yeah.
And you're pulling for him.
And even the way he walks in, you just know that he's got this air of confidence. He's rehearsed this. He knows.
Somehow the universe just airdropped him this confidence today, and he's going to do it. And I love the line when he's like, listen, when I went in there, it was like there was this. There was this connection, and it was this impulse. And he goes, and otherwise I would never have had the courage to go in there. He goes, Did you feel that? Mm-hmm. She goes, I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
Right.
Like, wow, this is just incredible dialogue.
Because, and it could go so well, right?
If a few things, and that's the thing. I think all those little things in the script are to not put it all on Travis. To not say, oh, you could have made different choices. Oh, you could have done all this. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, what if when he sought out advice from the wizard? Like, not like it's up to Peter Boyle to help him.
Right.
But what if he had really listened? This guy who is a self-appointed wizard of sorts, mm-hmm. that he says, that he's not even listening to what he says. Right. I got some bad ideas. Like, what do you think he's talking about? Like, maybe
right.
like playing racquetball this weekend? I don't know, is that a bad idea? It's like, no, he's clearly not well. And if he had just taken the time to just kind of, and then it's so tragically poetic when the way that conversation ends, Travis is standing in the street and Peter Boyle's cab pulls away. It's like, that's his last hope for salvation, pulling away from him right now. And that, I believe, is when he went full gung-ho. I'm buying guns. I'm training for a war, right? It's mm-hmm. like, that was it. He reached out. He really did try. And, oh man. And it's like, they play with this idea of fate and preordained. He has a line where he says, I've never had a choice, right? And it's like the reason we keep seeing Jodie Foster, we see her in front of the store where he doesn't even notice her yet. Right. And then we see her, and then she gets in his cab, and then he almost hits her with his car, and then he this and that, and he keeps seeing her, right? It's like fate is like putting her in his, that's the thing about this film, in which you can't, Scorsese himself talks about he deliberately wanted to make a film that blurred the lines between dreams and reality, right? So it really makes you kind of question what you're watching sometimes, and you're like, and really like, and there's all these states where they take you into the mind of Travis Bickle and mm-hmm. force you to view things through his eyes by using slow-mo, by showing his expression mm-hmm. on his face when he sees the pimp getting coffee poured from him, and you see how much he's like, I mean, he has some real rage and hatred in some of these scenes. He seems to have like a real problem with racism, mm-hmm. with, it's like really like, he's really like, he feels threatened in some of these situations, and it's like, whoa, like what is this guy's deal? And it's tough because it's almost like if you knew someone like that, but then there were all these things about them that you were like, I'm not on board with that or that,
in the original script, Harvey Keitel's character was supposed to be African American.
Interesting.
And when Scorsese got the script, he's like, we can't do this. They're going to riot. It's not going to go well. So we have to change this. Right. And that was a big, long conversation between the two of them into casting Harvey Keitel. Well, and
I also read that originally Keitel's character only had 1 or 2 lines, mm-hmm. and that they just expanded it.
Right. They added the scene where, for the most part, everything is from Travis's point of view, except for that one scene with him and Jodie Foster mm-hmm. in the room, and it's all in red, and he sings the song to her, does the poem, they're dancing. And the way they get around that is the next shot they cut to is like, the window coming down and seeing Travis looking up the window, so that possibly it's just him imagining what's going on, so that they could fit it into the structure that they've had. So when was the first time you saw this movie? Do you remember?
I believe I had just graduated from high school. I was hanging out with my friend Daniel, who was also taking a year off after high school, and we were just, it's the one I watched, basically discovered Bob Rafelson with, and we were watching a ton of Kubrick films, and I think he had already seen this, and just my first time seeing it, it was just so much to take in, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those films I've seen probably 100 times now, but I'm still noticing things. Yeah. And I mean, that final shootout really affected me. I don't know if I had ever seen, it reminded me of the immediacy of the violence in Psycho, of the way the shower scene sort of erupted from that film, you know, and it's just like, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, it's just so blunt and grisly. It's like, and yeah, it just really affected me.
Same thing. So in high school, AFI list came out. My friend Eric and I decided to watch as many as we could that summer, and so it was one of the first ones that we knew we wanted to sit down and see. And I can just remember being in his living room and sitting there and watching it, and everything that unfolding, and thinking, holy crap, like you can really do this. Like, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Right.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. The scene with Scorsese, like, I just remember just being like, dude, what?
Well, and then like there's two cameos. There's the one where he's sitting when Sybil Shepherd first walks by in the slow-mo shot, and then he's in the other scene. Yeah.
He wasn't originally supposed to be there. It was supposed to be someone else, but then he steps
I mean,
in.
talk about a marvelous use of composition. Like, this film is just put together so well. Each moment.
Even so, his introduction. So the opening, the first shot that we see. So there's the cab conductor or the manager's office,
right?
And there's this smoke coming from the bottom, and he just walks into the frame, walks into the office, and we see him, and we get the scene between him and just hearing Scorsese talk about how, you know, we had to make the smoke there because it's like he's entering from hell.
Right. Ebert talks about how then the camera is literally turned up to face downward at the end of the film.
Yeah.
So that's literally viewing it. It's letting you know, like, yes, we have been in hell this whole time.
Yep. And then there's the shot immediately following when he has the interview with the manager.
Yeah.
He walks out. The camera pans off of him. You see the whole cab garage. And then all of a sudden it picks him back up. So it's almost like the camera was behind him and then just picks up his point of view, follows him, and then all of a sudden he's right back into the scene. And there's just such a pre-visualization of how I want each scene to go and why the camera's going to move that way. Let's talk about the camera panning away from him. You know, it's an unmotivated camera move given motivation by a director who is clearly in charge of the vision of the film.
It's also like suggesting to us how to feel about the character.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about like really just getting in there and being like, no, we can't show that.
Right.
No.
You know.
And it's preserving and underlining his humanity. Is it not? It is kind of like, it's really, it's not allowing you to see him as, I don't know, it's like it's very easy to just say, oh, he becomes a monster, he loses his mind, he does, and it's like, yeah, he definitely is losing his mind, but he feels so isolated that how could, like, just what, we are forced to bear silent witness to this complete, I mean, it's unraveling, and you're able to see the whys and the you know, the slow, like seemingly invisible things that just add up until he feels like he can't take it anymore.
They never forget that he's a human being throughout the whole thing. You know, like it would be so easy for the filmmakers to just shut off and be like, okay, he's a psychotic, watch him go.
Right.
But they have these scenes, and you know, one of them is, for my money, one of the most heartbreaking things is when he buys her the record. Because that would be something that I would do, is like, we had this connection about this thing and I'm going to buy it for you. And then when she says, I already have it.
And at first she's charmed because she doesn't tell him that she already has it. It actually lets you know that she's actually like a good person.
Yeah.
Like, she's not really trying to be, you know, anything. It's like, And it's only when she's so offended at being brought to the porn theater and when it goes south that she's just like, you know what, I already, like, yeah.
The scene with the Secret Service agent, it's just, it's flat out funny.
Right.
It's funny the way he is playing with him.
He goes like this, and then he goes, "Yeah, I'm waiting for the sun to shine."
Right. That's one of my favorite lines.
And you can't really tell if he's messing with him or not when he says 6 numbers for the zip code, and then he goes, "Oh, I thought you were asked for my phone number."
Right.
And that's 7. It's like, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh wait, is he this socially like inept,
right,
or is he messing with them? And I like those kinds of forced pockets of ambiguity where you just don't know.
Right.
He's, you know.
And when he does the, hopper like a rabbit hip.
Right. The Secret Service photographer there, I found out, is a friend of Scorsese's who was a Vietnam vet and actually told him, it's where they got the idea for the mohawk. Yeah, because he said some of the guys would kind of like just go commando and they would shave like a mohawk. They would shave a mohawk, and that's when you knew that you just wanted to give them a wide berth, right?
Right.
And it's very interesting, you know.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where you're making a movie or you're working on something, and it's like the right person tells you the right thing.
Exactly.
Because the reveal of him walking out of the cab, and you're just on, the bottom half of his body, and then he goes in for the pill, and then that reveal when he lifts up and reveals the mohawk is like, it's a shocking revelation of where his character is going.
You know, a couple different moments that are brilliantly able to externalize his mental state are of course, the Alka-Seltzer moment. Where it's literally like, I mean, he's staring into the abyss of his own soul, just like, and then when he is rocking the TV with his foot, like it's just so, it's brilliant, because when it goes smash, it's like, well, he put it out there he doesn't care anymore. He's teetering on the edge, and he doesn't care about not falling off the edge.
Right.
So it's really brilliant storytelling to support. It's the idea of not just putting not just putting things out there, but being able to justify them and being able to find ways to make you truly feel them without just having a line explain it. No, like let's show it somehow. You know, brilliantly architected.
And having said that, like I think one of the best voiceover narrations in cinema.
So great. You really just get such a sense of him.
That is his inner thoughts, and like sometimes he uses and he talks to himself like, damn it, I gotta remember to ask her last name.
I know.
God, I
could totally empathize with all of that. Like just the way he does it. Like just, I don't know, there definitely was a time in my early 20s when I was like maybe struggling with some stuff, and I started like keeping a journal. And it really reminded me of some of that, of just like, she had cherry pie. No, I had cherry pie and ice cream. She had, I don't know, just how like itemized his detail is.
I always want to do this, because of this movie, I always want to do this, and I never do, but it's apple pie with a slice of American cheese.
Thank you.
It's like,
I wish I knew it like that. Yeah.
Just those little details, and it's all over this movie. Even one of my favorite bits is the guy that he buys the guns from is such a character. Yeah. And he just seems like he's just out, like they just
went out. It's one of the most realistic scenes. I mean,
and just like the little things that he like the little salesman type things that he does when he sounds like it's a beautiful little gun.
And he's explaining the history of it and how it replaced this gun during the war. Right. And, I mean, he's just pulling out all the stops. Yeah, and then at the end, he's just like, "Yeah, you want to get some drugs? You want to get some?" It's like, yeah, you know, there's something I noticed this time around that I'd never noticed, and. Jodie Foster is walking down the street away from the camera, and she sees like a potential John, and she says, You want to take a walk? And I had already seen the don't walk sign. When she said walk, there's these red letters saying don't walk looming above them like an unheeded visual warning. No, don't walk. Don't. I mean, it's so obvious. Like, it's just like, it's just there. And it's so aligned perfectly with the word that it's just, you have to be in the right state to, I think, take it, where you're like, I don't know, there's these signposts throughout the film. And it's just amazing. Like Alice in Wonderland, almost,
yeah.
you know?
Which, speaking of After Hours, has an Alice in Wonderland type music too.
Yeah.
I am always amazed. Like, this is one of those films that never seems to. Sometimes I think, like, am I going to grow out of Taxi Driver? Every time I go back to it, or that Robin and I sit down and watch it, it does still hold up. It does still work. Maybe even more so. Maybe it even grows in stature and in power each time you see it. It's not one of those films where it's like, well, I've done it so many times, it's okay.
Right.
Or, you know, a film that, like, when I was in my 20s, like, I kind of feel this way a little bit about A Clockwork Orange, where it's like, in my 20s, like, of course it meant something to me because, you know, I was full of rage and piss and vinegar, and, you know, I wanted something punk rock like this. But with this film, it's like, you know, it's got the punk rock stuff to it, but it's got so much more too. And part of that is, I almost said Elmer Bernstein. It is Elmer Bernstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait.
Bernard Herrmann.
Bernard Herrmann. Yeah. At first I thought you said Ellen Burstyn. No.
Bernard Herrmann's score, that saxophone,
Yeah.
is so tattooed into my mind of every time I'm walking down a questionable street or in the city, it's like it's there. Like, I hear
and
it.
how it's introduced is so amazing, because the first opening title screen with the exhaust is so ominous, this orchestral, just kind of like, it's just, you feel just the lurid aspect of it, right? And then it shifts, as soon as we get the close-up of De Niro's eyes, we shift into this lonely, plaintive, like, saxophone.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so amazing. It's like,
And seeing, like, the colors of the lights and the colors of the rain, now it
Beautiful.
mixes together in his eyes and what he's seeing. Like, it clues you into, all right, we're in this point of view, and it's not going to be your point of view.
This is the thing, as much of a visual master as Scorsese is, Chapman is a very special cinematographer.
Yeah.
It was the collaboration of these two, the ingenuity. I mean, reading about how they got a lot of these shots in the cab from being hunched down in the back seat, filming.
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of, they didn't have the money. I guess they really wanted to shoot it like Godard and Raoul Cotard, so that was like a concerted effort because they didn't have the budget or the time to really do much more than what they did.
Yeah, it's amazing listening to both of them talk about how they collaborated, because it was like they would just sit down and they would just talk and be like, "Oh, I love that Godard film. We just saw that. Oh yeah, we got to do that. We got to."
Yeah.
And that to me, like, I think he started with he started on The Last Detail, and that was his first film as a cinematographer, graduating from being an assistant cameraman. And every time, like, he has done a film, and in particular with this film and Raging Bull, it is like this artistic marriage where they have a particular way that they see things and that he can execute it with his camera.
I mean, vision meets instrument. You know, it's really like, it's that thing we talked about, the symphony. It's like the conductor knows how it's supposed to sound, but that person knows how to play the instrument. So it's got to be this communication between the two, you know?
Yeah.
And
he has a story where he tells, like, he's like, every director that I meet that does storyboards does it wrong because they're too, like, they hire an artist to do it and they're too perfect. But with Scorsese, like, they're all like scribbles, and like there'll be like little blotches of like like here's the blood, and it's like little
Right.
like expressions, and it just and like it's like no, it's not a perfect image, but I get what he's going for.
You know, speaking of blood, there was a very like Psycho-esque kind of situation there because they couldn't get an R rating, and so they had to desaturate the killing scene at the end,
Do you know
which
the whole
Chapman
story?
didn't like.
Yeah. Do you know the whole story?
What? No.
Apparently, I don't know if this is like urban myth or whatnot, but apparently what happened is, so Scorsese's working on the edit of the film. He shows it to the MPAA. They won't give him the R, and the reason is because of the ending, because it's just so
Garish.
garish,
Like, right? Just yeah.
and you know, and he's. You know, Scorsese is livid, and this is 1970s Scorsese we're talking about, who is like, you know, crazy, coked out of his mind, just a lunatic.
I can only imagine when he said that. Yeah.
But he's like, I think it's Steven Spielberg who tells the story because he was there with them, like they were all kind of hanging out, and he's like, I remember being in the editing room with him on Taxi Driver, and they told him that they're not going to let him release it because of the ending. And he was crazy. He was out of his mind. He's like, I got this gun. I'm going to go to the MPAA and I'm going to shoot one of them if they don't tell them that they're going to release my movie.
Wow.
And Spielberg's trying to talk him down and like being like, no, you're crazy. But he's like, well, what if you just desaturated the color? Like, what if you know?
So from Spielberg.
I think, if I'm remembering it correctly, he's the one that said, why don't you desaturate the colors? And for some reason, Scorsese's like thought of Moby Dick, because there was some. It's not entirely 3-strip Technicolor. John Huston did something where he took out one of the colors, and it's like it's not quite black and white, not quite color. It's somewhere in between.
I mean, his film knowledge is just unrivaled.
That's
among
the magic of Scorsese. That like
he literally knows every
desaturating,
moment of
like,
every film and everything about it. I mean,
so that kind of clued him in. And he's like, okay, I can't quite do that, but
Right.
if I desaturate it just a little bit, it'll make it look that much more. So he found a way to kind of make it work in his artistic vision, but unfortunately Chapman didn't like it because he wanted it to be like this. Like a kind of like this garish kind of painting.
yeah, it's like you don't want it to feel comfortable. You don't want. It's like that's the whole point, right? I mean,
I don't know. It worked. I notice it every time. Like from shot to shot, clearly something has been done to the footage.
Right.
I notice it every time, but for some reason it works for me. Like I like seeing that desaturated color.
Oh, it looks great. I mean, it's the thing. It's like a lot of times things happen for a reason.
Another thing about the ending that I like, and it's just like this little moment, but and I had always noticed it and didn't know if I was crazy in thinking it was what it was, but so he shoots Harvey Keitel, he goes down, and then he walks away and he walks down a couple of buildings. And then he just sits down on the steps and he's just kind of like rubbing his hands. And then he goes in to do everything else.
Right.
And I always saw that and I was like, oh, that's a moment where it's like, oh my God, I really did it. I got to sit down for a minute and I got to really think about whether or not I'm going to go through this or not.
Right.
Like it's just one little moment where he just had. And on the commentary with Scorsese, he says, like, he's like, yeah, and then we added this little moment here because it's like, there's so much that's going to happen.
Right.
We need a moment to sit down and breathe and show him have a conscience.
Right. Well, and even before that, though, he's in the store when it's being robbed and he shoots the guy. So that was really like the first, like, okay, I did this. Because I think it's less about saving that guy's life. He saw an opportunity to use his gun, man. He was not trying to be a hero. And that's why it's great seeing the way the ending is discussed by Scorsese, Schrader, multiple people, because Schrader basically says, like, yeah, like he's not cured by the end of the film. The next time he's not going to be a hero. And I tend to agree with Ebert in thinking that this ending is not real.
It's a dream.
And that it's either that he succeeded in killing himself and that these are the last thoughts he's having before he dies, or something. This is not, it just seemed like it's like what Spike Lee did at the end of 25th Hour, except he let you know that that wasn't real. Right? So
it is very jarring, the final images, because you would think like, okay, we're pulling away from that overhead shot, we're into the streets now, and it's like, okay, credits are going to roll, because where do you go from there, right? Like how do you recover from that, and recover in such a way that, oh, I got my job back, I got,
I think the hint that it's not real is, and it's just my opinion, is that it's the way Sybil Shepherd is towards him in the car. It's the way he would want her to be. It doesn't seem real. Even if she read this article about him being a hero, I don't think I don't believe that her character would all of a sudden be like, maybe I'm going to give you a second chance. Like I saw that in her eyes. Like the way she's looking at him in the mirror. It doesn't. It doesn't. No.
And even like the way she would never not look beautiful, but even the way she is, where like the wind is blowing her hair in a certain way, she's very angelic in there. Even more so than she already is. But because of the wind blowing her hair in a certain way, and she's wearing the white.
And it's interesting because I read a counterpoint, another reviewer, I think James Bernardinelli, where he says, he's like, well, the justification for it being, or the explanation for it being real, is just this use of irony in which, well, if he had just succeeded in killing Palantine, he would have been a villain. But the fact that he couldn't get the shot off and ended up killing elements of the underworld, it's like, oh, so now he's a hero, and just shows that thin line of psychosis between the two,
I need to take a minute just to talk, because I'm a huge Albert Brooks fan, so I want to talk about Albert Brooks.
He might be, other than Jodie Foster, which I think is the second best performance in the film, because it's just incredible. Like, how is she 12 years old, and how is she able to process this? But Albert Brooks may have been like one of the most solid pieces of casting in the film.
He's so perfect.
I know.
And just the little things that he
does.
But
the introduction to his character, he goes, I don't think that sounds the same. Do you? And when he's talking about the wrong things underlined on the button.
Let's not fight.
We are the people. You think that sounds the same as we are the people?
We don't pay for the pins. We get our money back. And then the whole thing about how would you light a match if you didn't have.
Oh, it's great. It's all so those, it's an impeccable attention to detail with every moment of the film.
And apparently, like, it was him and Scorsese just sitting down and, like, Albert Brooks.
Oh, because Albert Brooks is a filmmaker.
He can just
he understands, and the writer,
But I don't know if you saw this, but in one of the interviews with it, he talks about how Schrader came up to Albert Brooks after the movie was finished, and he's like, thank you very much for what you did, because you were the only character I didn't understand. And Albert Brooks is like, I was the only character you didn't understand? Everyone else is a psychopath. I'm a normal guy.
Oh, man.
But yeah, he's so perfect. And even like when he's trying, he's trying so hard to be the hero when he comes in, and he's psychotic, and he's yelling at Sybil Shepherd, and he's trying to get her down. And just the way when he goes into the karate stance, and like the way he's just like,
that has to be improvised. I think there was so much improvised by De Niro in this movie. I mean, we know that You Talking to Me was improvised, and actually the story I mentioned during the music episode is true. I saw verification on Wikipedia. So Daniel had told me a long time ago, the way he had told it was that Scorsese and De Niro were at a Bruce Springsteen concert, and they heard Springsteen say that whole bit. But then what I read was that the saxophonist on the set of, in his memoirs in '09, talks about coaching Scorsese on the set of New York, New York. And that coaching De Niro on the set of New York, New York, and that De Niro told him that I got that from a Springsteen concert, something Springsteen said to the audience. So maybe the Scorsese being there part wasn't part of it, but it was just really, it was really cool to like see that that wasn't an urban legend.
Right.
That's Bruce Springsteen,
I think that's
for God's sake.
I think that's the coolest story ever.
Right.
That it came from him.
And the fact that in the screenplay it just said Travis talks to himself in the mirror. That's it.
Right.
So the fact that De Niro was able to create, same with, I heard Jack did the improvised Here's Johnny,
Yeah.
which is a similar use of pop culture to
Right.
create a disturbing effect, right? But those are two of the most legendary actors of all time. So the fact that they're able to just kind of come up with, and that's why you cast someone like that, is
Who does his
like how
homework and-
brilliant are they at just they understand the character maybe at this point better than the writer themselves. And it pretty, you know, I mean,
Apparently, there's a story like that De Niro was so entrenched with it, and he did all this research, and then he called Paul Schrader and said, "I got these. I think it was boots. I think he said I got these boots, and I'm going to wear them. But do you think that Travis would wear these boots?" And Schrader's just like, "Look, man, the role is yours.
Right.
You are Travis Bickle.
Right.
If you think that Travis would wear those boots, I'm pretty sure he'd wear
That's
those
great,
boots." And nothing I'm going to say or anything in my opinion is moot at this point.
And then that creates the whole exchange with Sport, where he says, calls him cowboy,
Right.
And it's just this whole, I mean, there's a great story I read about how De Niro was in the middle of filming 1900 in Italy and is preparing the role of Travis, and he would leave on Friday after shooting, fly to New York City. He got his taxi driver's license and started moonlighting as a taxi driver to prepare for this role. It's like, and then would fly back to Italy and commence shooting. It's like, what? I mean, talk about complete dedication and just a craftsman.
And Peter Boyle said he heard that and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to do that." And he's like, "Wait a minute, I'm not going to do that. That's crazy." Like, and he would get recordings. He would find people in Kansas or somewhere in middle of America.
It was a base over in Italy. Yeah, and he would talk to Midwestern soldiers and compare accents. I mean, he's truly special. He's someone that it's easy to forget now how great he would. When people see modern De Niro performances and kind of like are like, oh, he's just not what he used to. It's like, well, you know what? The fact that these performances exist, it's like he is one of the greatest.
We talked about this with Nicholson, how there's this run. It's like, you know, De Niro is the same thing.
Yes.
It's an amazing actor in an amazing time where he is able to just film after film after film. Even I think this film and King of Comedy,
I love King of Comedy,
are like cousin double feature films. I think that him doing stand-up at the end of King of Comedy is almost as violent as the ending of this film.
It's easier to laugh at things in King of Comedy and not notice how sad or tragic they are. And it also, because of Rupert Pupkin and how ridiculous he kind of is, and like, but look at all the blurred like lines of when he's just realized how crazy this, how not to just like label him crazy, but it's like he is mentally unraveling throughout the film, right? And it does have elements of the same sort of blurred line between fantasy and reality.
Yeah, and to the point where Scorsese, when he's talking about King of Comedy, he's like, you know, we did this thing where it's like there's no blur effect, it's just cut to, and it's a dream sequence, and for the longest time you don't know if it's in his mind or not. And he's like, we did that deliberately because that's how he feels. He does not know the difference.
You know, we were talking about Light Sleeper last time we were hanging out, so I found out that Schrader, I guess other people have called it this, but he, given it a name, but he has basically a set of 4 films that have gotten the name The Man in a Room, or also Night Work. So basically it's Night Worker. So it's Taxi Driver, and then 3 films directed by Schrader: American Gigolo, Light Sleeper, and the Walker. And he basically said that they're all the same character, but at different stages of their life. and how they change throughout from film to film.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting. Yeah.
It's an interesting filmmaker.
Yeah.
Did you, excuse me, did you see First Reformed?
No, I'm really excited to. I went down a Schrader rabbit hole, man. I mean, I watched Mishima, I watched Hardcore. There's some really, really great films that were Blue Collar.
Yep.
Is a great one. I mean, definitely was a very good filmmaker.
Yeah.
Still is, and it still is apparently, because I heard First Reformed is awesome. What's the one with Nick Nolte, James Coburn? Starts with an A.
Oh, Affliction.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what the moment with the, I guess it's just a weird thing that they could be talking about, and that someone had to have made it up. I just don't know. The thing with the bathtub or whatever, like
Errol Flynn's, a piece of Errol Flynn's
right.
bath.
I
thought it was bath tile. Is it bath tile?
Yes,
yeah.
tile.
And then I never understood when he goes, see, he goes 3, 1, 8, 2. He just says these like 6. It's like what? It's like, what is that? I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand the world of memorabilia like that. But is that like, what are you proving there? What is that? He's not as good at selling as the gun salesman. It's like, no, sorry, bud. I really love the moment between, the guy's name is Doughboy, I think? Yeah. When you truly realize just how much social anxiety Travis deals with when he says, how's it hang? When they always go to the coffee shop and how's it hanging? And you're like it's just like he can't do small talk.
Right.
He doesn't understand it. And it's like he doesn't even, and he's so troubled that he doesn't even know how to respond to him.
Right.
Right? It's so unsettling.
Well, and even when he's first introduced to him, they're talking, they're all sitting around the coffee, and he's like, this is Doughboy. They call him that because he'd do anything for a buck.
Right.
Right. And De Niro just does a little and then goes right back to Wizard. Like it's all these little moments, and I don't know. Like there is a. It's weird. Like the racism is there. Yeah. It's totally there.
Well, it's also showing just how much racism was in the city too.
Yes.
Because he never comes out and says anything. It's more just the way he gets, like, towards different black people in the film when all they're doing is just walking by. Like he just seems to be like he seems to have this thing, like. Where you're just like, wow, what's that person doing to you? Like, why are you,
Yeah, and for both of them, one of the things that I love is that they, it's partly inspired by The Searchers, in that, Ethan Edwards and Travis Bickle, they're both veterans. They've come home from the war. They obviously have some trouble, some issues.
Right.
They both have these racist. Mindsets that's fueled by this anger, and they don't in either case it's never really implicitly explained.
Right.
A little bit more so in The Searchers because obviously he went to war with them.
Right.
But with this film, it's just like he is just on this whole quest to save this girl, just like Ethan Edwards is. But the city.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And we all we know how influenced by Ford Scorsese was. I mean, and Who's That Knocking at My Door? There's a reference. There's a Keitel, right? There's a whole part where Keitel talks about The Searchers, right?
And they watch The Searchers in Mean Streets.
Right. We were talking about the cafeteria scene. There's that moment when Travis takes out his money and he's trying to organize it, and the crumpled up 20 is in there.
Yeah.
And it's just this brilliant use of storytelling because it's that whole setup payoff thing of we know it's crumpled up.
Yeah.
We know how he threw it in there and how he didn't uncrumple it.
Right.
Because it offended him so much and disgusted him and exemplified all that he has this problem with. And it was just brilliant just to have it there.
Yep. And then that he uses it to pay. And there's an interesting moment because that shot, he comes out of the room from being in there with her, and it's one of those. It's like a Spike Lee shot that he obviously got from it, but he's on a dolly, and they're moving with him as he goes down the hallway.
Wow.
And it's weird because it's very short. Like it's just like this brief little moment where it's like, oh, he's not actually walking, he's floating towards this guy. And Scorsese would say that there's a shot, because he's obviously a Hitchcock fan too, there's a shot in Marnie where she goes out with the gun to shoot the horse, and there's a shot of the gun going across the screen, and for the longest time he's like, I don't know how he did it, like if she's on a dolly, if the gun's on, and he's like, in every movie I do a little homage to that scene, and I do it a couple different ways just to figure out how he did it.
You know, thank you for mentioning that, because it just made me remember that the scene when he's buying the gun, in which the camera slowly pans across the .44 Magnum, is the way Tarantino pans across the syringe when Travolta's about to shoot up.
Yep.
It's literally like, and it's like this, like, look at what we revere in this country, or like, look at, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not revere, but because I used to be like, oh man, he's like really like, I'm trying to think of the word, I'm trying to, sensationalizing, or like building up this idea of like, about someone about to shoot up heroin. But it's like, you know, I didn't think about it in that regard of like this homage to, you know, a similar kind of scourge in this country of like this, you know, obsession with guns and drugs.
Right.
And, you know, and then the hypocrisy of like going over to the war where it's like, yeah, do whatever you need to do.
Right.
You know,
right.
Kill whoever you need to kill.
And even like with because that comes into play too with, you know, the whole "you talking to me" sequence, that he is playing with the guns, and it is like a child, like, you know, the way the sun glimmer, the light hits it and shimmers on it, and, you know, the way he pulls it out, and
I mean, the genius of that set piece.
Yeah. Dude, the first time me and Eric sitting there watching it, we're like, what is he doing? What is he doing? What is he doing? And then, and we're just like, holy
It's brilliant. It is amazing.
Yeah.
One thing I love in this film, and it's almost very heartbreaking, is like the voiceover of him writing the letter to his parents.
Yeah.
Because it's the first time we've really even been given a sense of anyone that's related to this guy, or that's even in his life in any sort of capacity.
And then he gives them money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His journal entries truly do portray his humanity and his desire to be good.
Yeah.
And he really does try. That's the thing, man. Chronic insomnia, I mean, God.
His inner thoughts, and when he shows his humanity, are very, like, they're very poetic. Like, there's a, you know, they cannot touch her.
Oh, I love that one.
That one, and then, but then when he starts going into it, like, there's the most obvious example is when he's rehearsing into the mirror, and he's like, you know, he turns towards it and he's like, listen up, you blah, blah, blah. And then he has to start over, and they start the shot over
I love
again,
that.
right?
You know, a great hip-hop record by Exhibit, his debut, At the Speed of Life, on the first track, he samples that, and it just starts with that monologue, and then here is, like, and then it goes into the music, and it is like perfect.
Awesome.
I mean, it's just, and that's what I love about movies and hip-hop. There's just this appreciation for film and the use of sampling that's just really, really fun. Yeah.
One day a real rain will come and wash away this scum.
Oh my God.
That is one of the best, most, just the anger and the disgust.
I love when he picks up Palantine in his cab, and I love the look on his aide's face when he's like, are you hearing this? Because he like literally turns to him and looks at him like,
Like, why are you asking him questions? Let's get out of here.
Because it's gradual. It builds,
yeah,
right? It's because he doesn't immediately reveal how troubled he is.
No.
Because it's like a slow build.
And it's so great that when he finally does do it, he beeps at somebody too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great.
And he's just lost. He's lost in his thoughts, and it's just and the recognition that Palantine gives him when he's just he takes a moment before he's like, yeah, I think I know what you mean, but he's just looking at him and being like, you are a troubled man, and I get why you are, but man. And someone, IndieWire does all these lists, and they did this recent list where it's like scenes that almost ruin the film that they're in, and they had the gall to put that scene in the list.
Which one?
The Palantine scene.
Where he's in the cab?
Yeah.
Well, because did they think it's like, what are the chances that he's going to pick him up in his cab, or like, does it seem like far-fetched?
I don't know. Like, I think they tried to say like he's not the best actor, but I mean, he's just a politician, man. He doesn't need to be the best actor. I thought it was great.
Anything,
and it's one of the most important scenes in the film to showcase how that's where he gets the idea.
And I love some of De Niro's line deliveries in that when he goes, I tell everyone in my cab to vote for you. I know I'm gonna vote for you. I mean, it's just like, he has a way of saying things that's just like one of a kind, man. It is Nicholson-esque. It's his own thing. He does his own thing with it, and it's just so authentically real. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like...
There's a couple of moments in the opening scene with the manager like that, too, when he's,
clean, like my conscience.
You gonna bust my chops?
Yeah.
That's another one of those...
as soon as he hears that he's a Marine...
Right.
It's that great moment of acting without words where he's like, he immediately changes his whole posture and how he deals with him.
Yep.
Oh, you're one of my own, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, let me look past this. Mm-hmm. And it sort of shows you just like how little compassion people really had for each other, And it's just like, because before that, he didn't really want to give him the job, right?
And there's two moments. Like one is like education. It's like here and there,
right?
And then when he doesn't know what moonlighting is, that's a great thing because he hears it and he tries. He tries to kind of figure it out. And then what's moonlighting? It's. I
guess Notes from the Underground. Dostoevsky was one of the, as well as Arthur Bremen's diaries. It's also interesting. John Hinckley. They actually used Taxi Driver in the courtroom to show, because the guy was obsessed with Jodie Foster and, man, even shaved his hair to the mohawk, right? Yeah, just life imitating art. Crazy.
And thankfully it survived that, right? Because there's other films that would have been taken down and being like, well, this is the film that led to this, right?
Well, I remember in The Program, with James Caan, kids started imitating that scene of laying down in the middle of the road.
So they had to cut. They cut that scene
from the movie. Yeah. Man.
Program.
Never thought The Program would make its way into an episode, but
it did.
It did.
It joins the ranks of Howard the Duck and Iron Eagle.
Howard the Duck is 10 times the film The Program is.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I hate saying that because
I know. It's the type of film you could go on for hours.
It was. I used to call it like one of those films where, when I was in film school, you go to one of your friends' dorm or their apartment, and 9 times out of 10, there's going to be 2 movies in there. One is going to be Fight Club, and the other is going to be Taxi Driver. It was just one of those films that are just kind of like unilaterally across the board, like everyone just had to have and had to watch and was influenced by. There's something about it, like hearing the stories about Chapman and Scorsese, how they're scrunching down in the cab and they're getting these shots. Like that to me is like what. Like that's filmmaking right there.
The hearing about how difficult it was to pull off the aerial shot at the end, about how they had to go through the ceiling and all this stuff, and it's like it took forever. And that's like Wells having to dig that hole
Right.
for Citizen Kane, right? It's the same level of.
And we talked about this too. It's like, you've got to have, that's the tenacity of Scorsese as well as the matched tenacity of Chapman, of being like, where's simpatico? That shot is important. We've got to get that, because there's probably people on there who's like, well, how important is it? Do we really need that overhead shot?
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, we really do, because it's everything, and you got to have that.
One of the most jarring moments in the film to me is when Jodie Foster screams, "Don't shoot him!"
Right.
And he does, and it's like, just I don't know, man. There's something in that moment that's really tough to take. Like just the almost like a final, like just like final vanishing of her innocence, like as if it wasn't already kind of compromised.
Right.
But then it was just like witnessing that, man, such an epic adventure, but like at the same time just like so psychologically harrowing, you know.
Yeah. It's one of those great introspective films that at the same time is very cinematic, and is very, it does a great job of charting this course, and like there's action throughout the whole thing, right? And we're seeing all these things happen visually, but it is one of those great introspective, deep films.
I mean, Scorsese will go down in history as being one of those people who could use the camera to communicate so much. It's how you use the camera. Don't move. Don't have a reason, right? That's the whole Hitchcock way of moving the camera,
Right.
Because
one thing is like, hey, isn't it cool that I moved the camera away from the character?
Right.
Well, not if it's to get away from one of the most tragic things you're seeing, like how it's so embarrassing and it's so just awful that he's trying to get another date with this girl that he just took to a porn theater and ruined their relationship. And that is why we're doing that.
And none of the use of slow-mo was superfluous. It was usually to show it from his perspective and make you realize, like, oh, this is how Travis sees this.
There's the great dissolve at the beginning of the film when he walks out of the cab thing and he's walking down the street, and then it just dissolves to a closer shot of him. And all these things, like, because it's Scorsese, he's like, I did that because there's a movie that I saw like, a long time ago where it does that. But he goes beyond that, because he's like, yes, I'm stealing that from that thing, but I'm using it because of this, and this is what it means to me.
I mean, it's all one quilt, right? So it's like, who cares if this thread's over here? If you're using it in a way to create a new image, you're using the same. Technically it's the same thread, but the image looks different.
Right.
Yeah.
More Scorsese.
If you haven't seen it, see it, please. Tonight. You
will not regret it. You will think, even films that try to be like this are not like this.
I thought of Falling Down, a movie that if it had a little more humanity and took a little more time to really let you know that character, might have been a better film.
Right.
It really wanted to be this. It certainly did.
There are films that want to be this, but it's not. Like, this is truly is, if not one of the greatest films of all time, certainly one of the greatest films of the 70s, one of the greatest character studies. I think it's De Niro's greatest performance.
I didn't think about how much Fight Club owed to this.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. Definitely. So, yes, see Taxi Driver, and then continue down the Scorsese rabbit hole if you haven't already. And we will be back, and we'll do another Scorsese somewhere down the lines, for sure. But next week, we're excited. We're going to be doing film noir.
My favorite genre.
His favorite genre. Your father has asked if we have any films on the list, and it's
there's almost too many.
There's too many, and it's just we're just going to go and we're just going to try to talk about everything. And we know that the episode will end and we'll be like, oh, we forgot to mention that.
Exactly.
But it's okay. It'll be a great episode anyway. All right. I have been David Metzger.
I have been Devon Ewalt.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.